So good morning, everyone. My name is Kwadwo Burgee, and I work as a vulnerability analyst for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Yes, I will be putting up the slides in just a second. I will share my screen. In fact, let me do that now, and we can just jump right into it. So my talk today is going to be about stakeholder-specific vulnerability categorization. I'm pretty sure some of you are aware of CVSS, Common Vulnerability Scoring System. So CVSS is a way of scoring vulnerabilities, but I wanted to give some context behind what the U.S. government has been testing, I want to say for about the past year. This is a joint project with, this was created through the U.S. government's relationship with Carnegie, Mellon, SEI. And this was a scoring system that we were using to kind of give us an idea of how to properly assess risk when it comes to scoring vulnerabilities. So first off, I'm going to give you the bottom line up front. I'm going to talk about CVSS and SSVC. I'm going to talk about SSVC as the introduction to it, how we used it, and one of the key advantages of SSVC is its adaptability. I'm going to talk about the testing. I'm going to talk about how we incorporated SSVC into CISA, and I'll also be talking about the results and the impacts that we've seen so far from using SSVC. So to give you the TLDR, or the bottom line up front, everyone is aware CVSS is current de facto standard for prioritizing vulnerabilities. One of the issues that we have had as analysts within the disclosure branch within vulnerability management is that it needs improvements to better assess vulnerability management and risk posture. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that if I am thrown a CVSS score of a vulnerability of 9.9, then that's a, oh my goodness, it's a what I like to call a Thanos snap event, in that half the universe dies, everybody is in danger. But if that 9.9 is associated with a smart TV that's not connected to my network, that number doesn't really give me any of that context. So as we were looking at scoring, we were looking at ways that we can provide more context to vulnerability scoring, so that way we can associate where we need to put our resources. SSVC was developed by the Software Engineering Institute, SEI, or who you know as part of it is CertCC, as part of their CISA-sponsored work plan. So with this, it addresses issues with CVS, a couple that I've already told you about, and it aims to improve vulnerability management at a process and accounts for diverse stakeholders. Not everybody's network is the same. So we have seen that with SSVC, it allows for stakeholders, for organizations to have a better handle of where they can put their resources when it comes to vulnerability remediation. SSVC also supports CISA's goals of helping stakeholders make the best cybersecurity decisions. At the end of the day, I can throw numbers at you all day, but you are the one who is in control of your network, and you can assess your risk better than I can. So we have taken SSVC, we've customized it for our disclosure branch, for our scoring system. And the testing has been happening since April of 2020, and the results have been pretty much positive. So SSVC is centralized around evidence-based decisions, a decision tree, whereas CVSS focuses strictly on technical severity and how bad a vulnerability is. SSVC focuses more on an environment and how your environment is set up and what risk that vulnerability has towards your environment. Again, developed by SEI as part of their CISA-sponsored work plan, but it's currently in the hypothesis stage. We are pushing information out because we want people to kind of think about it, to test it, to see if it works for their own environments. This is not something where the U.S. government is saying that come July, everyone in the United States has to use SSVC. That is not our point. That is not what we're trying to get across. The only thing that we're doing right now is that we're showing, hey, we've been trying this out for a year. There are some results to it. You guys could take a look at it and see what you think. Give us any feedback to what you see might be positives or negatives to it. And let's try to put together something that improves the entire vulnerability ecosystem. We've pushed it out to the ICS community. I know some of you have seen some versions of it already incorporated. The one that I'm going to be showing you now is specifically to IT and how Disclosure Branch scores things. This is not as an attempt to try to tell you that everybody should use it this way, which is actually one of the positives of SSVC is because of its adaptability. So the decision tree is what allows for that adaptability. Previously, Disclosure had a numeric scoring system of how we did things internally. But one of the disadvantages of that was that it was limited to the analyst's interpretation of available information. What that means is that if someone has been in the field for about 20 years, they can assess differently how something should be scored as far as a vulnerability is concerned to someone who's been in the business for about 5. It's not a sense of like one person is right over another, but it allows that sort of context and allows those perspectives to be considered within the decision tree. So it also has a reliance on prevalence data. Current sources aren't reliable or necessarily accurate. What do we mean by that? It means that it's based off of a yes or no. Is there proof of concept available? Is it being used? Are these devices in your network? How prevalent are they in your network? And it takes those decisions and it puts them together, and it helps to kind of give you a framework of how you should look at certain vulnerabilities. So the solutions for SSVC, there's a decision tree, which is the outcomes based on relevant data. As I said, like some of it is binary and some of it is just based off of knowledge that you have about your environment. The purpose of the affected product is considered, but it's looped in with prevalence. Again, if I have my smart TV that has a CVSS score of like 9.9 and it's sitting on a separate network completely separated from my internal, then okay, that's one thing. But if I have that smart TV connected to my Active Directory, I've got some other problems, but it also incorporates that, hey, you need to kind of take a look at the way the decision tree is based off of because of this. Exploitation evidence is weighed, whether there's proof of concept or if there's no proof of concept, or if it's actively being exploited. And the mitigations are also tracked within the decision tree. So for us, for CISA, we have broken down decisions into 3 categories. There's a 4th category, which I'll get into. So the first category is track, which basically means we kind of take a look at it and we say, okay, there's probably something here, but we'll kind of keep an eye on it because it might be something. But for right now, we don't need to really put a lot of resources in. You can patch this as you need. Anything that's a little bit above that, it could be like, okay, this doesn't look bad, but one decision could make it like really, really terrible. Changing it from a meh to a, oh my goodness, Thanos just snapped half the universe out of existence. We put that as a track star. Attend means that vulnerability requires attention for people outside of vulnerability management. What does that mean is that we're taking a look at this as like, okay, this is almost going to be a big deal. What we need to do is we need to let people know, and if something happens, then we're already prepared. I can give you an example of that, of just something that happened yesterday. So our branch scored the recent VMware vulnerability, the 2198, the CVE 2021-21985. We scored that when information was released back on May 25th, and we scored that as an attend. Part of the reason we scored it as an attend is that this thing allows for remote code execution. It's really bad, but as of right now, there's no proof of concept that's available. So we'll keep that in attend status, and if anything changes, then we can push it up to act. So something actually did change, and it changed it to act. And what happened is that we received proof of concept, and we also received reports that exploitation was likely happening. So when you have proof of concept that is actively being exploited, or we feel is likely actively being exploited, then it pushes it up to act. An act is like all hands on deck, red alert, battle stations, requires immediate attention, relevant leadership is aware. That will usually lead to a current activity advisory, which is posted on the CISA.gov website. It can also lead to emergency directives that are pushed out, such as what happened with SolarWinds and the Microsoft Exchange vulnerabilities that happened back in March and April. So our vectors for SSVC are based off of the following: exploitation evidence, virulence, technical impact, mission prevalence, and public well-being. So the exploitation evidence, as I said, with the VMware is either none, proof of concept, or active. Virulence is slow or rapid. What it means is that slow is, okay, you just shut off somebody's computer with a BSOD. Rapid means, oh, I can make this wormable. Technical impact, partial or total. Again, BSOD versus I have complete control over the machine and I can run code as I feel. Mission prevalence is the importance of the software or the hardware to the environment that it's installed in. And the public well-being is minimal, material, or irreversible. Irreversible comes with like loss of life. Mission prevalence and public well-being cross-intersect for low, medium, and high. So if you have public well-being of being high, such as the irreversible, that could mean that as far as taking out a traffic light in a busy intersection, something like that could conceivably lead to loss of life. So I know this is small, but I'm going to walk this through with you with one example. And this is an example of the SSVC tree. And depending on the decisions that you see on the screen, you walk through a tree and you decide, is it slow? Is it rapid? Is it partial? Is it total? Is the public well-being medium or low or high? And depending on the decisions will lead you to your final destination. Now, the good thing about this is that we have based it off of what we see, what our requirements are. But the adaptability of SSVC allows for others to kind of consider other factors within your decision tree. So if you don't think that, if you're not really looking at like mission well-being, or what you're focused more on is, as a vendor, is this something that needs to be, do I need to send out a patch immediately? Do I need to have my crew work on a patch immediately? Or is it something that can be patched within a monthly patching cycle? That's all figured in the SSVC decision tree. So I'm going to give you an example of our CISA's legacy scoring for SSVC versus SSVC's actual scoring when we did it through a decision tree. So one of the examples, well-known, Bluekeep, CVE 2019-0708, we scored that internally as a 17 or a medium. Our scoring system went up to 25. So at a 17, it's like, it's almost there, but we need to kind of keep an eye on it. And that was only because proof of concept hadn't been released at the time that the vulnerability had been remediated. Our score had a 17. It was based off of impact, prevalence. Impact, which is similar to how bad it is. Prevalence is how prevalent it is within the United States government. Competency, how easy it is. The higher number means that it's very easy. Exploitability is either a 1 or a 5. It means if it's 5, it means it can be done over the network. 1, it has to be local. And mitigation, is there a patch? If it was a 5, then there'd be no patch. And mitigation 1, there were patches that were released for this. We ran it through SSVC and the decision tree came up as a 10. Exploitation had proof of concept. Now, if that proof of concept became active and someone was actively using that, that would be pushed up to an act based off of how we see the SSVC tree. Virulence came through as rapid, obviously because it's wormable. Technical impact is total. You can take down all types of things with it. And mission well-being is high because remote desktop is pretty much used in Microsoft environments. So to give you a breakdown of how we came to that decision with Bluekeep, here we go. So we start with exploitation. Is there no exploitation? Is there proof of concept? Or is the proof of concept active? So we saw that there was proof of concept available, but at the time, it was just blue screen of death. It wasn't really doing anything. So we went from there. Virulence. Is it slow or is it rapid? It's rapid because the vulnerability was wormable. So we pushed that over to rapid. The technical impact. Is it a partial technical impact, as in it could take a system down, or is it total impact, which means that it could absolutely ruin your day, take down the network with the right information, with the right tools? So we said it was a total. And mission well-being, is it low, is it medium, or is it high? We saw that the mission and well-being is high because it's prevalent in Microsoft networks, so that led us to an attend. That is how CISA's version of the SSVC decision tree went through. And to kind of like give you an idea, Bluekeep scored lower as a CVSS. So you would think that, okay, it's not really that big of a deal. Let's not really take a look at it. And then you kind of walk through the decision tree and say, oh my goodness, we have to take a closer look at this. So here are some of the results and impacts of SSVC within CISA. Most of the vulnerabilities that we have scored as far as like risk level with the US government, we have scored those as a track. It helps with, we've seen that it helps with awareness of products within your network. It kind of gives you an idea of what you have to defend. You don't know what you have to defend against unless you know what you have. So for an example, there's a Microsoft Office RCE, which was a memory corruption vulnerability. Our legacy scoring had it as high, but when we ran it through SSVC, because of the other factors that were involved, it went through as a track. But then we have an Oracle WebLogic Server RCE vulnerability. Our legacy score had it as a medium. It's like, nah, it's not that bad. But when we ran it through SSVC, it was definitely rated as an act. So our current usage of SSVC is as follows. So for act decisions, the red alert, Thanos snap, they're escalated to relevant leadership, which means leadership has the information, and more importantly, it has the context behind the information that they need to make the right decisions. Resource allocation is to the most severe vulnerabilities. Because the VMware was pushed up to an act, resources were pushed to get information out to leadership, to create vulnerability notes for leadership, and to get that out to the public because of how severe it was. So internal and external messaging. As I had mentioned before, if you look on our website, we posted something late yesterday as a current activity. Sometimes you'll find activity alerts. If you look at the Microsoft Exchange vulnerabilities from back in March and April, you'll see activity alerts associated with that, as well as the Pulse Secure vulnerabilities that have been released over the past couple of months. You also see tweets and other mentions within social media. So analysts also find SSVC to be faster and easier. So it's attributed to evidence-based factors. We have new people who have joined our team, and we're able to teach them up on SSVC based off of evidence that is publicly available. Now, we share our information amongst analysts to make sure that we're all seeing things the same way. But for the most part, we're all on the same page when it comes to making decisions using the decision tree. And we've also scored over 400 legacy vulnerabilities within the past year. The ease of using SSVC is pretty much incredible, because with our previous system, we would score vulnerabilities like one every 10 or 15 minutes. With SSVC, we're able to score vulnerabilities at a rate of like 5 times that. And CISA analysts update SSVC decisions when new information is found. So as I mentioned before, the VMware vulnerability, we associated that as an attend, but once we found out that there was the likelihood of exploitation, once we had seen Twitter and seen some areas getting hit, then we were able to push that up to an act, because we could say, okay, POC is active. Now we can push it up to an act. Now we can push it to our leadership and make decisions based off of that. So if you guys have any more information, if you want any more information, you can go to CISA.gov. You can email csd@vm_disclosure@cisa.dhs.gov. I'll also leave my email address in the comments if you want to reach out and you have any other questions about this. One thing that I will say is that we are not ready to publicly release this yet as a, this is what the government has done. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to get information out as to this is what we have been doing with testing. We are currently working on a white paper that will explain our findings and to kind of give you like a better idea of what to look for when we finally come out with SSVC. I'm going to open the next 10 minutes up for questions. So if you guys have any sort of questions, feel free to ask. And I will get to the questions within the comments. Thank you, Aaron, for posting that link to the white paper. That is the original white paper for SSVC that was created. So Mirlos, how much of the decision tree would be published or recommended, or does it depend on every environment? So it does depend on the environment that you're using. Now, depending on the type of software, the type of hardware, and also depending on the technical severity of the vulnerability, that stuff is also included within the SSVC scoring. So rather than looking at specifics within like one particular vulnerability, can it be exploited remotely? Yes, that's part of the decision. Is there active POC? Yes, that's part of the decision. So even if you do or do not have those devices on your network, some of the decisions that are calculated through SSVC will help to determine what direction you need to go. Eric, yes, these slides are absolutely available. I will make sure that they're available. You can reach out to me. These slides were actually approved by our external affairs, so we can definitely share that. Hitesh, any resources to learn more about SSVC and how to adapt it to insurance companies? That's a good question. So there are resources available. The first thing I would do is I would look at Aaron Steele's link at the white paper for SSVC and how it was created. Now, for our purpose might be a little bit different than insurance companies. However, I do believe that the SSVC decision tree kind of filters along the same lines, that it's somewhat based on your environment and you can modify it to fit your environment the best way. We just want to make sure that we get this information out so that departments, agencies, organizations, leadership, management, analysts, everyone has the kind of context that they need to make better decisions. Govinder, thanks for the initiative. Oh, thank you. The 4 levels, which make it more accessible for management. Totally agreed. As an analyst, I was one of the ones who was scoring previously with the old scoring system, and I knew how cumbersome it was. I can tell you the SSVC decision tree is a lot easier, and it really allows us to score more vulnerabilities with more context, whereas the previous one did not, and I had to explain a lot of things during the old system. Hey, Trevor. Have you considered incorporating a Transformers F story in your future talks? No, but I will say this. I was able to explain the concept of SSVC to my wife earlier this morning using plants. So I was able to explain a decision tree based off of how you would apply it if you were talking about plant diseases. So Fareed, I would like to better understand how the scoring system works for SSVC. If you can provide more information on that, sure, we can provide the slides, or if you want to talk with us one-on-one, we'd be more than happy to have a discussion with you in the coming weeks if we want a better description of how we have used SSVC. I'm sorry if I'm messing up all of your names, but Shuaib, sorry, I know, just to give you an idea, people mess up my name all the time. Sometimes they call me Cardboard instead of Kwadwo. So thanks for your presentation. I may have missed this at the beginning, but could you describe what led CISA to develop SSVC as an alternative? Sure. CVSS, we were looking at it. You have a huge number. You have a number 9.9, vulnerability, Thanos step, everything's going bad. But there's no context behind it. When we are scoring vulnerabilities and we're trying to assess the the risk of a vulnerability with regards to the U.S. government, it doesn't really give us a lot of context. we were looking for alternate ways for scoring, and that's how we came across SSVC, because SCI came to us and say, hey, we created this alternate scoring system. Would you like to check it out? And we're like, sure, let's test it out. And we've tested it out for a year, and there have been a lot of good things that have come out from it. So happy to have further discussions with you, either offline or in another forum. And thank you, Govinder. It was a little difficult for a second to explain that in plant format, but thankfully I pulled it off. So does anyone have any other questions? And more than happy to. And I want to say, and I also want to say, just like, thank you for all of you for attending. This information doesn't work without an audience, without someone to actually hear it and to even consider it. So I'm grateful that you guys have come in and you've taken the time out to hear this talk. And I will be available for a while after the talk is over. If you want to reach out to me on Slack, I will give you my email address, CISA.dhs.gov, if you want to reach out to me directly. So are the plants in track, attack, attend, or act? It really depends on what affects the plants. So it really depends. The way that I explained it was that, let's say you have news of a disease that affects a plant. Let's a tree. A disease that affects a tree, but okay, I don't know what tree it is. Okay, it's a pine tree. We don't have any pine trees. Okay. This is what you need to, if you have a pine tree, this is how you spray it. So I was able to kind of explain SSVC in that format. It is not a Gundam behind me. The Transformers that you see behind you are as follows. That is a Ghostbuster Optimus Prime. That is Starscream. The green thing in the black is Devastator. And the one in front of that is a Dinobot. So what are the next steps for CISA on the SSVC project? We're currently putting together a white paper. We will release that white paper in the coming months, and that will incorporate a lot of our other works and discoveries when it comes to discovering SSVC. We will make that public. We're also working with other agencies, companies, both with IT and ICS, and just explaining our findings and trying to figure out how we can make things better. At the end of the day, we want a safer ecosystem. I'm pretty sure everyone attending wants the same thing. We want to make things safer for our customers, for our colleagues, for our friends, family, everyone. We want to make things safer. And this is one way that we think that we can get closer to the goal. So that's part of the reason why we are pushing out this SSVC. Now, do we think that it's supposed to be a replacement for CVSS? We're not going that far because we still have to get to the white paper and we still have to do all that. But I will tell you one other thing is that we are planning on automating this so that when you run decisions through SSVC, it'll be automated so that your decisions will come out based off of the information that you've already put in. And Mirlos, thank you very much. Like I said, thank you for attending. I know we're almost at time, so if you guys have any questions, I'll hang around. I'll be around Slack. I'll be in the lobby. Like I said, any other questions, please let me know. And thank you all for attending. Thank you very much.